Yo, goons. Welcome back. Today, we're going to be doing a Goldlewis matchup chart because this character has been generating a good amount of buzz lately in regards to how good people think he is or isn't. And I thought I'd give my perspective, seeing as how I am a top Goldlewis and I've mained him since he came out. First off, in this tier list, this matchup chart, I'm assuming tournament level play only or above. So when I say this matchup goes this way because of this technique, don't apply it to your floor 8 friend who's new to the game and just wants to swing the big cough. Probably not fair. I'm talking about people with matchup knowledge and mechanical skill and experience. People that routinely perform well in big online tournaments, of which there are a lot. So with that being said, let's get going. Starting off with Happy Chaos. Firmly a losing matchup. In my opinion, this is probably bottom 3 matchups for Goldlewis for a number of reasons. Pre-patch, this was just bordering unplayable. Nowadays, we can at least try to get in from time to time using the minigun, shooting through the clone, catching sloppy reloads, and focus. And the main reason I bring up minigun is because Happy Chaos can just completely negate drone if he wants to in exchange for 1, 2, sometimes 3 bullets. You can jump over it, you can roll under it, you can roll under it raw actually and not get hit if you space it right. And combined with his very oppressive normals that he can use to space outside Goldlewis JD range, and by the way his success lariat will also catch JD because Goldlewis does not go high enough, it can make the neutral quite a struggle against Happy Chaos. But that's only where the matchup begins. Because once you're put on defense against this character, he has better mix than you, and he has a lot of options that space outside your 2P range, but will frame trap under 8 frames. In other words, that's going to make using 2K very difficult. So, the defense is brutal, the neutral's hard, and most of all, Happy Chaos can snowball against Goldlewis like no other characters. Most characters need to break the wall to get some damage off, neutral resets, drone holds down the neutral for you, and you're in the game again. Against Happy Chaos, he'll slump you in the corner to death, and there's really nothing you can do about it. Every character has this issue, but Goldlewis in particular struggles because of his weak defense and telegraph neutral against the character. In particular though, when we're talking about normals, 6S, 2S, and far slash are all very good against Goldlewis. They hit at good angles and or low profile his normals, so should be clear. Now, Baiken's an interesting one. I would say that in tournament level play, Baiken is actually an even matchup. And I lean toward slight losing, but I'm going to say even because I've experienced a lot of variance in this matchup. It really depends on the Baiken. But I will note that far slash on round start is very strong against Goldlewis. Actually, if you 6P Baiken's far slash, hard call it out on round start, you cannot get a conversion off of it. You cannot 684, you cannot 624. Some kind of weird range interaction with that button. You can't get anything. She really has no reason not to go for it. It'll just smoke pretty much everything that we have. And not being able to win round start as Goldlewis certainly goes a long way in the matchup. Of course, she has the parry if the Baiken player is well educated on common Goldlewis gaps and frame trap spots. The parry is very strong. Even if you actually don't hit the parry, you just get the long range version and guard crush the Goldlewis. Any way to end his pressure is very good. She has a double quarter circle reversal super, which generally makes it easier to buffer to reversal out of his pressure as well, and that is certainly a factor even at tournament levels of play. Then there's the JS. Really makes it difficult for Goldlewis to get in, and is also difficult for him to contest unless it's super telegraphed. You see it coming from a mile away, and you 6P. Right, but that doesn't happen all too often. The Baikens know what they're doing. Not to mention that her Escabari pressure is not the easiest for Goldlewis to deal with because our button 2P, our 5-framer, the range on it is not great. If they're using things at a right range and they're staggering H-Kabari, especially outside of your 2P range, it really becomes a guessing game. It starts to be a little bit stacked against you. That being said, Goldlewis tends to be able to get pretty good mileage out of drone and jumping dust in this matchup because a lot of Baiken's buttons are very horizontal, and she does not have a very good 6p, and that absolutely makes a difference when it comes to the matchup. That, and there's a lot of RPS in this character, and Goldlewis doesn't mind RPSing all that much. She can gun the drone. That's annoying. Anytime you get level 3 drone out, they just gun and they're plus. Yeah, it can be a struggle, but I think overall it roughly comes out to being even. Anji is definitely a winning matchup. I feel like I don't need to explain this all that much. Anji is not a particularly strong character right now, and actually Goldlewis specifically has pretty decent tools of dealing with Anji. So his 5p will call out Anji's, when he jumps up in the air and throws the fans down, I believe that's Rin, off of Fujin, and that is a really common greed spot for Anji's, and the fact that we get a hard knockdown and left-right side switch attempt basically means they shouldn't ever be going for it in the corner, and when that's no longer an option, all you need to look out for is the high-low. You start getting your IB timings a little more consistent on Fujin and punishing with 2p because it is a 5-frame button and you can't get a punish on the low. It becomes a lot harder for Anji. He's got the dance to go around your beam and your drone, and those can be annoying, but at the same time, very easy to grab, and the risk reward is not with Anji in those cases. It is certainly with you. It comes down to the fact that Anji is an RPS character to some extent, but you RPS much better than he does, and he doesn't have any good buttons to lock you down in the neutral. Far Slash is decent, not good enough though. I believe that Axel is very close to being a winning matchup. Extremely close, but I would say that overall it's still relatively even. I could go either way with slight winning or even here, but in my opinion, the reason why this is a decent matchup for Goldlewis is because Axel cannot take risks on defense. It is majorly stacked against him because he really only has 2k to mash out, and if you do pressure that's safe against 2k, or that calls it out, and by the way, his reward on it is bad too, which also factors in, you're going to, as the Axel player, get into a lot of trouble against Goldlewis. He actually also has pretty decent ways to navigate around drone with, air snail to stall his momentum, air dash in with his long range buttons, but just being able to close the distance against Axel with drone goes such a long way. And this matchup really is dash block simulator. But once you get your IBs down, if you're IBing rainwater, especially if you're IBing snail, it just becomes brutally difficult for Axel to get strong pressure. He pretty much always has to trade to get safe pressure against Goldlewis instead of strong pressure, because if he guesses wrong, or if Goldlewis guesses right, it's really just not a worthy transaction for him. Moving on, Chip. Firmly a losing matchup. This is certainly a difficult matchup for Goldlewis, at the very least at tournament level. This is one where I would definitely say the tournament level asterisk matters, because there are lots of chips that will just Pepega, run in at you, do fake pressure, go for air grab, go for alpha blade. I'm not talking about those chips. I'm talking about the chips that will sit back in neutral and just backwalk and wait for you to whiff literally anything. And if you're not whiffing anything, they'll wait for you to dash block up and then chips in for free, right? And they just kind of juggle between those two ways of navigating neutral, and that makes it very difficult to actually get in against this character. Even though he's a rushdown character, if they want to play the patient game, Goldlewis genuinely has no good options, and stalling for drone isn't particularly good either, because he's so fast, he's going to run up and whack you during the startup a lot of the time. Right. That's not even what makes it super terrible per se. That does make it hard, but not terrible. What makes it terrible is that you cannot contest his Rekka pressure. His Rekka pressure will space outside your 2p range. It's just the angle that it goes at, and that makes getting out of his pressure, especially in the corner, just brutally difficult. What happens a lot of the time is they'll go for fake resets, and you have like a frame or two to contest it realistically, and then they're generating more meter, they get their mix, they get their wall break, they get their infinite pressure, and it's GG from there. That's another thing that makes it difficult. Chip can get in very easily against you if he chooses, right? And so if he has that positive bonus, even without a hard knockdown, you're dead. Really, he just has to hit you once and you're locked down there for infinity. Not to mention that he can convert and wall break off of pretty much anything to get it. So overall, certainly not an easy matchup, but he does die in a couple hits if you manage to whack him a few times. So 5k I tend to find is very good in this matchup for the active frames, 9 active frames. Use that to call out chips running in and being monkeys, and make sure your 6ps are ready and your 2ps are ready to call out the drill. But It's not really enough to compensate for the pluses that he has going for him. Faust, also another firmly losing matchup. Wow, is this matchup difficult. I feel like I really haven't figured this one out. And I have been trying to put more effort into this one recently, but I think really just in theory, it's not very hard to understand why this is a bad matchup for Goldlewis, and also in practice you just need to watch some matches against him. I say that because our jump arc is not high enough to easily navigate around like half the items he gets, right? A lot of characters can deal with the hammer bouncing off the ground and the anvil a little better, the 100-ton thing. And most importantly, they have an easy way to get over Mini Faust without committing to a really slow jump squat and air dash and getting anti-aired on reaction. Also, in this patch, Faust's 5k on round start will beat a lot of your jump-in options, and that will give him a full conversion on counter hit, which also makes it very strong against JD in general. JD, not particularly great in this matchup, not to mention Faust's crouch animation and a lot of his low-hitting normals. Right. This is another one where the neutral is very rough, because Faust has these long-range, disjointed normals a lot of the time, and also the item toss. And what tends to happen in this matchup is they're tossing items, yada yada, you know, they're doing Faust shit. You try to gun, he can crouch under the gun. He's not even in block stun or taking chip. He just straight up crouches under it, and there goes your chance to get in, basically. Because if you commit to drone, that's like 3 free item tosses for him. And then he goes super high in the air, and you have to pray that super jump JD hits, and even if it does, you're still not in, unless it actually connected. Not on block, on hit. Yeah. So he gets Mini Faust. He runs up and tick throws you. Your only choices were to use your shitty 5-framer to try to contest it. You'll get frame trapped half the time. And overall, it's just really, really hard. The main thing for sure is the item toss. Like, it is so difficult to get past this Goldlewis because there's a wall there for you where other characters have mobility options you really don't. And your raw BTs are out of range to get across that wall a lot of the time. And if he pulls Mini Faust, that's just a license to pull 3 more items, and then it's just kind of on loop and GG. I find this one very, very difficult. Very, very difficult. Also, Goldlewis's pressure is a little weird against Faust because of his height and his hurt box. I find tend to interact oddly with 486 and 862. His overheads, they seem to hit earlier and be less plus than against other characters, which makes sense because he's taller, so it is hitting them earlier. But nonetheless, that is another annoying thing. Moving on to Giovanna. I used to believe that this was a winning matchup this patch, but now I, if anything, lean towards slight losing. I'm willing to put it into even though. Mostly because it's kind of a similar case as Chip, where the Giovanna can really play the patient game in neutral. And more than in neutral, in their pressure, they need to know how to play the patient game. This is another one where tournament level play matters for the distinction, because if you're playing Giovanna against Goldlewis, honestly, you shouldn't be special canceling like 75% of the time against him. Because if you just back up and wait for him to 2k, 5k raw behemoth, even if he dash blocks again, I mean, pretty much anything that he does, if you give him a little bit of space as Giovanna, you can get right back in there, if not just straight up punish it. And that makes it difficult if they take a neutral style that way. What can happen sometimes is a Giovanna player gets blitzed though. You know, they'll try to give you a little bit respect, and all it takes is one JD, one 5k, and from there, you're gaming. Gia's defense, though, is actually not bad against Goldlewis because she has a 4-framer, and many of Goldlewis's frame traps are exactly 5-frame gaps. So it can also be hard to maintain pressure on her. Also has a small hurt box, also has the aerial super to help her get out of corner pressure. But overall, in my experience, this isn't too bad. Right, if the Giovanna player is RPSing with special canceling a lot, and especially if they're doing, you know, 2-1-4K and trying to steal their turn back afterward, that's when it becomes like it's looking very good for Goldlewis, because you will win that RPS most of the time. It's definitely stacked in your favor, and once you're in, you're Goldlewis, and she's Giovanna, so you're getting a lot more out of it. But yeah, I would like to see a little more experimentation in this matchup, but I certainly think that a patient style of play as Giovanna, combined with a knowledge of how to play neutral against Goldlewis, will push it away from winning for Goldlewis and into the even category. It's my opinion. Right. Next up is Soul. I would say Soul is better than slight winning. I would classify this as a winning matchup. And the reason is that this is a strike throw character whose reward is less than yours and whose pressure is less threatening than someone like Giovanna's or Chip, because they're not as agile. They can't really back up and whiff punish as well. Even though that is the same strategy you want to be taking as Soul. In the corner, you should not be mashing far slash. You should be doing far slash, back up, see what they do. 2S, 6S. Sometimes throw in a fake Gunflame into Fafnir nowadays. If you're pressuring like that, it can feel annoying, but I have to say, overall, this is certainly not one of Goldlewis's struggle matchups. So on round start, a 5k trades with like most of his good options. He can back up and delay, try to whiff punish it, but getting in as Soul can be a little bit difficult as well. He doesn't have great ways of navigating around drone. So Bandit Bringer is good. Vortex is good as well, not Vortex Bringer. But I tend to find that both of those are very risky without meter. So what you kind of do is Goldlewis is you just dash block at him when you pull out the drone, and you're getting mileage off that. Also with Soul, a lot of his buttons are very horizontal as well. Kind of same issue that Baiken has, except to a greater extent, because Soul's pressure is not as threatening, so you can afford to go for it more. But yeah, 6S, far slash, 2K, 2S, they're all very JD-able. And Soul's air-to-airs are really only threatening in the corner, so, and his 6P hits pretty low. It's really just JD all day in this matchup. It's pretty much all there is to it, I would say. He has to interact with you. That is Soul's main downfall, and that's not something that Goldlewis minds whatsoever. He does have the DP, so that helps him. Maybe pushes his down to slight winning, if anything. But the risk reward on DPs is not amazing against Goldlewis, so it doesn't make a huge difference, in my opinion. Kind of depends on the character. Still annoying in cases where they have meter and whatnot, but Guard Crush actually makes it very risky to use DPs. You have to have pretty precise timing or be very good at mashing it. Speaking of DPs, let's talk about Kai. So I think Kai's slight winning. More or less all the same reasons as Soul is winning, except for the fact that Kai has better options to keep you at bay than Soul. Now the Fireball doesn't matter all too much, but his normals, and again, a character where you don't want to be special canceling all the time in the corner, and instead using things like 5H, 6H, 2H especially is very strong against Goldlewis to call out any kind of preemptive buttons in that range, and especially to anti-air. So it's still not that bad though. That's the thing. Because again, this character is very JD-able. He has a much better 6P as well, another reason why he's only slight winning and not winning. But overall, it's not hard to deal with Kai as Goldlewis. It's really nice that you have 2P for Foudre Arc, because you don't really have to adjust your block. You're down backing a lot of the time. You see Foudre Arc on react, oh, 2P, hard knockdown, and you're in. It's not too bad to deal with him, I would say. Dipper RC is annoying like it is on anyone, but your 5k has 9 active frames. You can even JD to call out Dipper RC. And of course, if you get your IBs consistent against Claire, I don't actually know what it's called. But if you do, Kai becomes much worse. You know, that's true for every character, but especially for Goldlewis. If you can start punishing that with 2P, oh man, they get into trouble. But he can still be oppressive sometimes, especially when they start staggering the normals and special canceling less. That's a common theme, by the way. Right, Leo. I would classify Leo as a slight losing to losing matchup. It's somewhere in between, probably. Mostly for similar reasons as is a common trend with a lot of his losing matchups, which is that Goldlewis has a really hard time contesting Leo pressure. Especially once he's in, we tend to just get vortexed to death. Like, we're not gonna 6P, we're not gonna 2P, we're not gonna jump out. A lot of the time, it's just guesswork once he's in on you, and it's not very hard for Leo to get in on you. Now, this is a character where having the DP makes a huge difference, because Leo's DP, unlike the other ones, is incredibly rewarding on hit, and it's also a different input. The charge input makes a difference because you don't have to specify a side. So if Goldlewis is going for left-right mix-up, which a lot of the time is not completely reversal safe, but tends to get away with it because you're on the opposite side of the opponent that they thought you would be. It doesn't matter for Leo. So that affects Goldlewis's mix game to a pretty decent extent on knockdown, especially near the corner, and it certainly hurts the matchup. Right, even non-back turn, the neutral can be hard to deal with. Leo fireballs are solid against Goldlewis, and like any character, he has good stagger pressure, like 5k, 6k stuff. It's still very strong against Goldlewis. It's still very, very, very strong, even after the nerfs. Now, the only thing that makes this matchup a little bit more tolerable is, once again, Leo's a very horizontal character, very JDable set of moves. So you can at least get away with your war crimes there, and 5k to call out the random 5ks from Leo in neutral. A lot of the time it will win, so not too bad. Moving on. So I would classify Mei as still slight winning at tournament level, with the asterisk that I don't think this is a great matchup for Goldlewis at like top level, or if the Mei is highly educated in the matchup. And it comes down to what we've been saying over and over, which is that if you just stagger your pressure and rarely use Dolphin or don't use Dolphin, it becomes so much harder for Goldlewis to deal with. But if they are using Dolphin, Goldlewis actually has some very dependable options to deal with Mei pressure and do a good job of reestablishing his turn. Right, so if you block S Dolphin, 684 will beat pretty much anything that Mei tries to go for afterward, which means they get conditioned to just hold that, which lets you get away with greedier turn steals, and of course stealing a turn off a character's like fundamental move is a big deal. Also, on 0 delay S Dolphin from pretty much any distance beyond point blank, if you just tap 2p after their normals, it's going to catch it because of the disjoint, and you're going to get a hard knockdown off of it, which is great. And because of the low recovery, if they delay their Dolphin or go for H Dolphins or, you know, the vertical Dolphin, whatever, you can still oftentimes interrupt it and still get a hard knockdown off of it. And Mei's got a 4-framer, which is annoying, but at the same time, her normals are a little stubby on defense. So you can really take advantage of that using 486 pressure. And I think overall the calculus shows that it's a fairly winning matchup for Goldlewis. But it certainly has the potential to get worse, just like this next one, Milia. So I used to believe Milia is firmly winning for Goldlewis. I really, really did. But then I played against Rat and Walter. Put your away, Walter. I'm not having with you right now. Anyway, I played with them a little bit, and it was so much harder. Same exact principle as Geo and Chip. Fast characters naturally excel in neutral against Goldlewis, and if the Milia player isn't being super telegraphed about their jump-ins, it actually is a little bit hard to anti-air and 2p her pressure as Goldlewis. But that said, she's very squishy. Her defense is nowhere near exceptional, and you kind of just get to go to town on her once you're in. But you have to be very careful not to be committal in neutral. She also has decent answers to drone, so her super, where she sends a little hair wheel, I forget the name of that, but that is both plus and destroys drone at all levels, which is a big deal. Being able to trade meter for drone goes a long way in the matchup. But also, she can just do her little command dash, teleport through it, and obviously aerial mobility is really high. Right. Also, Goldlewis has a bit of a tendency to struggle against vortex style pressure, just because our defense is always bad. Just keep us in defense, and if we need to mash out to get out, we're probably going to end up losing before we do a lot of the time if you're doing your pressure properly. That said, Milia doesn't do a lot of damage. We get a lot more chances than she does. And also, her pressure isn't particularly crazy scary compared to a lot of other characters, in part because of the reward, in part because she has a clear indication of when her pressure is done or when it's fake, unlike a lot of these other characters if you're staggering. Like, staggering with Milia doesn't really get you anywhere. So naturally, that's going to make the matchup a little better for Goldlewis. Over time, this one could certainly get worse, though, I think, if Milia players learn to properly play around Goldlewis in neutral and not just give up space, but choose to use their time and use that great 6p they have against him as well. Might get a little better for her, but I definitely think it's still winning. So this is probably a little bit of a hot take among Goldlewis players, but allow me to explain why I think Nago is roughly an even matchup. I actually think it's pretty clear if you just compare the characters side by side, which I think is also a decent argument that they're similarly good to each other. But Goldlewis and Nago kind of do the same things, like they're immobile, quote-unquote, characters that have a few ways to get in really easily. Nago has the clone and Fukio and Beyblade. Goldlewis has the drone and JD. And the reward is phenomenal once they're in. They both have amazing pressure, amazing damage, high health pool, 5 frames of backdash, same jump squat, 1 jump. They're pretty comparable characters. Good range on their buttons, disjoints. The real difference is in how they pressure. Nago goes ham, and I would say he has a better time opening people up from neutral than Goldlewis. But once they're in, I think Goldlewis has better pressure than Nago, on the contrary, and you could argue that there's higher value to being able to open someone up from neutral versus once you're already in, and that's fair, but I think overall they kind of cancel each other out in that particular matchup, because Nago is going to be interacting directly with you, you're going to be interacting directly with him, but you can pressure him very, very effectively because of his immobility, and especially once you get Nago in the corner, oh man, he's one of the characters that really struggles against Goldlewis pressure. So, and I say this having played with Nubenheimer a lot. That is the #1 ranked Nago, if you don't know, CEO Otaku champion. Built different, definitely the best Nago in my eyes, and I've played this with a lot of other high-level Nagos, right? And especially once you get your IBs down, that's like the real difference maker in this matchup, and once you understand that you can tap IB in your dash to go under 2H a lot of the time when you're toward the corner and then whiff punish it, makes a huge difference. You have to have some knowledge. Other little things like, you know, knowing when to super jump, knowing how to go over clone, knowing when to time your aerials properly instead of just buffering a jump and getting 2H'd, they all make a difference in this matchup. And I think that a reasonably good tournament level Goldlewis should be able to make it even over the long term as a result. But you really, I can't stress this enough, you really need to practice your instant blocks against this character, because it makes a big difference for Goldlewis, especially on 2S5H. If you're not doing that, it's probably a losing matchup. Maybe not even slightly. Pot. Oh god. Move this one to the top. Easiest matchup in the game. I hands down believe that this is the single best / worst matchup in the entire game. We don't have to work at all in this matchup as Goldlewis players. It's actually really sad for Potemkin, as though he didn't have enough problems. He also has the single worst matchup in the game against a pretty relevant character nowadays. So why? Okay. #1, he cannot deal with JD. He does not have a good way, especially if you're super jump JDing. He really just doesn't have a good way. Slide head gets stuffed. Bar slash, limited range, slow startup. Same deal with 5H, not even the best angle anyway for dealing with JD. And it's all just very committal. But moreover, once you're in, you can just run train on this character, because he does not have any threatening defensive options against you. None. Except for maybe the occasional IB pot buster if they're really built different, but this is tournament level pot, so I can count the number of players on one hand. Snake I should compete though, just saying. Anyway, he can't back Mega Fist against you. He can't slide head against you. He can't hammerfall against you. Not that anyone hammerfalls in defense anyway, but you get the idea, right? If you try to back Mega Fist against Goldlewis, all of his BTs, pretty much all of them that you're using in pressure, are going to catch him trying to do it. You get your counter hit, you get your bombo, and Pot's sad. Also, Pot used to be able to flick level 3 drone and get the explosion off of it, treated the same way as every other projectile. For some reason now, it must have something to do with the interaction of the projectile level or priority of the drone that they did in Season 2, but I really believe that Pot can't deal with it very easily. He has to time his flick very precisely now, and a lot of the time, because of that extra precision factor, since you're approaching with drone, you just throw in a JD or a far slash and you'll counter hit him trying to flick it, and then it's GG. Like, the biggest reason why this matchup is just terrible is that once you're in, it's so hard to lose. You know, you can be so bad at Goldlewis pressure and just make a really good Potemkin sad by doing degenerate options, because they do not have a good way of dealing with it at all. So TLDR, You stomp him once you're in, and it's not hard to get in. That's basically it when it comes to Potemkin. Right. So Ram, slightly losing matchup, I think. So I used to think this one might be even, and I still believe it is certainly possible. I've done fairly well against Rams. You know, I think I almost beat Solstice one time in tournament. It's pretty manageable, mostly because you have decent tools to deal with her. Your 5k is very good for calling out her low pokes. If you're using raw BT in neutral, a lot of the time you'll catch Rams getting greedy with trying to outspace your normals, and raw BT is gonna catch their 6Ps, catch their far slashes. And also your 2P is very good against the flip. And if you learn to react to that flip every time, which you definitely can learn to react to it every single time, and you're 2Ping it, and you're getting a counter hit, and you're getting a close slash, you can side switch off that. It makes her pressure weaker when she can't really mix up anything except for the Rekka. And that's where being able to IB, again, matters a lot. Because if you're able to IB that consistently, Ram's pressure is a lot less scary. And all it takes on Goldlewis is one back throw incident. All that being said, her corner pressure is also terrifying against you. It's so hard to deal with. Having the 5-framer low range makes it tough. Like if they space so that the sword explosion goes off and they're in 5k range and you're not in 2p range, you oftentimes just have to hold whatever comes next. And I think that, combined with the fact that Ram is very speedy for some reason, by the way. I mean, does she need to have that much speed, ground speed? Probably not. And her 6p is very strong against Goldlewis. I think those in tandem make it a bit of a struggle. If the Ram is also good at doing dash cancel Rekka pressure, that's a little bit hard for Goldlewis to deal with as well. Because we kind of just have to take risks on defense. It's the nature of the character. That's what we have to do for having such strong offense. Overall, I think it tends to be Ram even. She also, Ram slight winning, excuse me. And she also has a very good reversal super. It comes out really fast, and so they use it during your frame trap gaps, and you're not going to be safe even if you try to bait it a lot of the time. And that's hella annoying. But overall, it's not too bad. You get away with JD, you get in, and she's going to try to jump out in the corner a lot of the time, but you're choosing the right BTs, and she shouldn't be able to. You're just getting tons of extra pressure while you juggle them in the air. Overall, not too bad. So, Zato, definitely a losing matchup. Oh god. Where to even begin on this one? First off, the neutral. Eddie neutral is really difficult for Goldlewis to navigate around. If they're making good use of a pose, they kind of just start spitting out their thorns all day, their spikes. It's a lot, and it's hard. You know, you can try to 5k to call out the Drunkard Shade from a pose into this. It's a lot in neutral, but if they choose to frog instead and start mixing it up that way, you kind of just have to hold it. And once they're in, then you're really screwed. Because just like is the common pattern here, your 2p is your only real option on defense against this character because of the gaps that Zato creates. And a lot of the time, Eddie is not going to be spaced in such a way that you can safely get a 2p kill on him, unless the Zato really messes up. And even if they do, which is what makes it so firmly losing, they're not in a bad position. Why? Because the 6p beats pretty much every single option that Goldlewis is going to go for after he manages to live a mix-up or a full Eddie gauge, or if he even kills Eddie and tries to get in. Drunkard Shade, the hover, air dash delay timings, all of it is not easy to deal with as Goldlewis at all, and all it really takes is 1-2k2d and his Eddie meters back, and Goldlewis has to go through that nightmare again, right? And he's very susceptible to getting looped in the corner by Zato pressure. So this one's tough, for sure. Definitely a tough matchup, in my opinion. I would boil it down to this. He has great pressure that we can't really contest, whereas most other characters have a good way of contesting it. We can't really jump around Eddie because we have a small jump. We can't really mash on Eddie because we have a short range 5-framer. And also, we can't really get back in even if we survive all of it because of the 6p, because of the backdash, the air dash, the hover, invite hell. It's tough. Also, like most characters with a decent matchup against Goldlewis, he can destroy drone for meter, except his is probably the best in the game because he just summons Eddie off of it. You just use the sword super, and it both destroys level 3 drone and puts Eddie right in front of you. So that really, really sucks. It's super annoying against that character. And he's building a ton of meter during his mix and whatnot. God, it's tough. I don't need to explain this one. This is even. Mirror matchup. Testament. Oh man. This is a really hard one as well. So, excuse me, just having a sip of my water. So what makes Testament hard? You can't do anything, basically. That'll do it, right? That'll constitute a hard matchup. But why can't you do anything? You try to do anything, you get 6 speed. Literally anything. Literally your entire kit is vulnerable to her 6 speed, or their 6 speed, excuse me. Literally your entire kit, every single button from it, including your BTs, will clash with it. For some ungodly reason, the hitbox is so big on it, it will clash with your raw BTs, which are designed to call out stray 6Ps a lot of the time. And also, you can't jump over the crow a lot of the time as well after they use Grave Reaper. Long range on their normals. Arbiter Sign's a nightmare. -12 is not enough for Goldlewis to work with at the ranges where they're using it. And also they have good low profile buttons, the DLC 2K classic right there on Testament. Right. Also another example of quarter circle supers, I believe, which makes you more susceptible to mashing out. And that's hella annoying because getting in is very difficult against this character. They also have a great way of dealing with drone. They too can not only destroy drone but convert into advantage off of destroying drone by summoning the succubi. And they're just going to eat the drone and put you into block stun. Also, their conversion ability is amazing because you really need one hit into Succubus Super, and you're generating so much meter because you can just throw out normal into Grave Reaper into Crow against this character, and we're just sad. We have to kind of take it and let Testament do whatever they want. Even though their defense is not good against Goldlewis, they're a squishy character. They shouldn't be playing defense very often if they're navigating the neutral well enough, because it's just so easy to lock them down, especially in the corner. You throw in your 6Hs, it catches our low jump arc all the time. You throw in the far slashes, the 5Hs. You don't even need to do those. Just Grave Reaper and Crow can be enough. Vertical Grave Reaper, the diagonal angle is also difficult. All of it just amounts to a nightmare of a matchup, especially in the corner. The pressure is so hard to deal with because it's way outside of a range where you have any good defensive options. And dash blocking up in between is not a good option against Testament either, because you're just walking right back into their hitboxes, and Grave Reaper pushes you back quite a bit on block. IB also goes a long way in this matchup. Being able to IB the second hit of the Grave Reaper is very important for keeping yourself from being pushed back into a free Crow, because we're so slow we can't close the gap in time to do that. Yeah, this one's very, very difficult. I think this is maybe his worst matchup. Right, it's hard to say. These are all difficult. Speaking of losing matchups, Jacko. Right, Jacko doesn't even need resources to destroy drone, first of all. Like, that's the first thing that comes to mind, because I hate that so much. By the way, neither does Zato. He can oppose or just go under it using that little shadow puddle thing. I don't know the name of it. I don't play Zato. Anyway, Jacko can just put up the minion shield, and for some reason, it just straight up destroys the drone, no matter what level the drone is. I don't know why, but it does. Right. Also, dealing with Jacko pressure is tough, and getting in on her is tough too, because it's hard to stop her from just pulling minions in neutral because the drone is useless. Drone's a bit of a crutch, I have to admit. we have a bit of an over-reliance on it, so when a character can deal with it really well, it makes it a lot more difficult. Also, Jacko's round start is pretty good against Goldlewis. Has some buttons that are diagonally angled, which tend to be really good because they hit him both standing and jumping, and that can make it quite annoying to get past. But the main thing is just pulling minions is very safe against Goldlewis because the drone's not a threat and because Goldlewis is so slow. Also, 236k pressure. Oh my god. So, if you didn't know, basically, when Jacko uses her 236k, she can then pull a minion or do an attack command, right? Or whatever. But if she has no minions out, that's basically a way of reducing the minus frames on that button. And it works out in such a way that Goldlewis basically like has to preemptively mash there or give up another 2k 2d attempt from Jacko. And that's really annoying because they can mix that in with pulling a minion and running away. And then you have to get in through minions, which is also very difficult as Goldlewis because they kind of just sit there and hover, and you're not going to be able to jump over them because you're so fat and have a small jump arc. Makes it a struggle. Also, this character will put you in the corner and make it look like you don't even have the best corner pressure in the game, which you do, but it doesn't look that way when Jacko has meter, excuse me. Crank your risk up to max. 5D. GG. The Jacko classic. Yeah, so what makes this one difficult at the end of the day is that Goldlewis cannot easily take back his turn when Jacko's offense is over, and the drone is useless in this matchup. Those are like by far the two biggest things. But like with any character, especially the squishy ones, especially the ones with 5 framers and bad reversal supers, you get in and you just go to town on this character. So that's what makes it tolerable. Also 2P goes a long way for killing minions coming at you. It's actually the best button. You don't want to go for 6P, far slash, or whatever. You want to go for 2P and use the disjoint on that. Okay, moving on. Slightly winning. You know what? Winning. No, slightly winning. Sorry, I'm going back and forth here, but our 2P is just so great against this character. 2P giveth and 2P taketh away, and this is definitely one where it giveth, because what you do is you kind of just run up and you crouch block a little bit away from her, and you wait for her to either use Chemical Love or Note, in which case you just like either wait and far slash in the case of Chemical Love, or just far slash in the case of Note. And if they try to dash at you, you just 2P, and you'll just stuff everything that they go for because of the disjoint on it, and they won't be very high up in the air if they started dashing at you from relatively close. It's just so good. And then you're in. And this character can't jump high on defense, can't really do anything. So again, another one of those characters where you definitely just go hard. 5k is also very good for catching low jump arcs. Sometimes, oddly, it can anti-air, but more importantly, it's very good for calling out stroke. 2k is also pretty good in this matchup because it's going to be spaced properly a lot of the time by default by how, spaces herself on offense. And again, she's another one of those RPS characters, but your RPS is so good and she's interacting with you, it's not that bad. However, if they're really playing the zoning game and making good use of Chemical Love and spacing, it definitely becomes a bit of a harder matchup. But overall, I think this is definitely a slightly winning matchup for Goldlewis. Now, back to an even matchup. It has been a while since we've been here. Look at this, almost a symmetric matchup chart. Interesting. But anyway, yeah, Bridget, her pressure can be hard to deal with as Goldlewis. I'm not going to deny that. He can get vortexed, and the normals can be annoying, but her damage is still kind of lacking, even after a lot of development on this character. So I'm pretty confident in saying that because all of her normals are not disjointed and you just 6p once, or even raw behemoth or a JD, and they die. Such a squishy character. Not the best DP. Yeah. On average, they should be winning the neutral. They should be getting in and mixing you. But you only need 1 or 2 opportunities against Bridget. And you have very strong safe jumps. You have really good mix. Bridget's defense is not the best. And the main thing that differentiates Bridget from the matchups that beat Goldlewis is the amount of reward that Bridget gets. It's kind of the same in the case of Milia, I would say, for how much they have to risk relative to JD 6p, just unsafe pressure that Bridget has. They're really not getting nearly as much as Goldlewis does if he guesses right 1 out of 4 times. So I think it simplifies to an even matchup as a result of that, but I could be wrong. I'm still not too sure about this one. If anything, it might be worse than even. But yeah, this is going to be my current Goldlewis matchup chart, in my opinion. Now, keep in mind the asterisks I said. This is for tournament level play. in my opinion, and assumes that everyone has knowledge of each character, but nonetheless, you're welcome to disagree and give your takes. One thing I do want to say before closing this video off, though, is that a lot of people have the impression that Goldlewis is a super strong character right now, like top 5 easily, really, really strong. Then you look at his matchup chart. Tell me which of the top 5 characters have a matchup chart nearly this symmetric and are losing to some characters that aren't really considered super relevant, like Faust, Testament, and Jacko, right? I don't think that that's going to be a common pattern with, you know, Happy Chaos, Ram, Leo, Nago, Zato. I don't really think it's there. But nonetheless, this character is really strong, and I will say, if the opponent doesn't have matchup knowledge, it does not matter what character they are, unless they're Faust, they just do item tossed. You will win much more easily, right? Goldlewis' matchup chart against people who know and don't know the matchup, it is a wild difference. In fact, he pretty much maybe only loses a couple matchups, assuming not a lot of knowledge. Like Faust and Chip and Testament, I would say that's the limit of his losing matchups if they don't know, and even then it's not bad. It might even still be even. Right, if the opponent doesn't know the matchup, you're pretty much always going to win with Goldlewis, and that makes him unique compared to the rest of the cast. Mostly because it's actually pretty common that people have limited counterplay experience with him, because his counterplay is very non-linear and extremely knowledge-based compared to most of the cast. There's not really an intuition or physical component to it or reactions. You need to know a lot against this character. Right, so I think that's going to cap it off for me, Goldlewis. If you enjoyed this video, if you want to see my Goldlewis live, twitch.tv/me_Lolo. That's all from me, Goldlewis.